group are talking about like they're artists, all of them, female artists, and they're going to talk about what it's like a year in the life. So would you please help me give a warm welcome to Leah and Francesca and Kate, who are going to talk about being true NFT artists. So please give them a warm welcome. Woo! And speak into the mic. Speak into the mic.
Oh, okay. So on this panel today, we have 3 artists. We have Kate Philipson, Francesca Pears, and I'm Leah Sams. We all entered the space almost just over a year ago. But on top of being artists in our own right, we have also founded 3 major brands. So we founded 2 projects, Lost Girl of the Metaverse and Power of Women, and Fangirl Friday, a Twitter space turned podcast. So I'm just going to get straight into it. So there's no getting away from the word community in Web3. We've built community in very, very different ways. So, like, how do you think this has impacted sort of your success as an artist? And I wonder, maybe Kate, you can just sort of jump in here and talk about a little bit more about Fangirl Fridays, how that feeds into, you know, your success as an artist, as Leopard's Lunch. Maybe?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm a one-of-one NFT artist, and that's how I entered the space. And I set up Fangirl Friday about 6 months ago because I just felt like Twitter Spaces were underused or not used in a as positive way as they could be. The medium's great, and I thought it was a really great way to get to know other artists in the space. So the aim of it is to kind of connect with other artists. It's an amazing community, the space itself. We all know that. And I think there's a real interest in learning about artists. I think the panel before us or the one before that even, we're just talking about the fact that it's really important as a one-of-one artist to get your personality across. And I think the way I've built my community is kind of slightly by accident, but it's really enabled people to get to know me as an artist, sort of as I've lost the words for it, but sort of as a kind of secondary response to kind of me interviewing other artists. So I'm giving away a bit of myself, and that has helped me build my community around my one-of-one art. So it's kind of been really completely unintentional, but I think being authentic and just being yourself in this space and letting people get to know you that little bit really helps to build a community. Yeah. Fangirl Friday itself has a community because people in the space are interested in people. You know, people will come into this space thinking it's all about money, thinking you want to make money, you want to have a revenue stream, but actually you will quickly learn that it is about the people in this space. And that's how Fangirl Friday community has really sort of supported me as an artist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Fangirl Friday fed off this sort of ethos that I think attracted a lot of artists in the space, because I think we all loved this space and the fact that we all felt like, I mean, WAGME came out of like, we're all going to make it. But I think it was the idea that there is space enough for everyone. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, you know, Fangirl Friday was this ethos that, yes, you are an artist, but this is a space where we are going to feature and actually understand other artists really well. You know, I think you always say that you learn from other people's process. And I think it's the whole essence of Fangirl Friday is that you sort of appreciate all of these sort of creatives in the space. And yeah, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. I think that like the reason why I wanted to create it was because a lot of artists were doing their elevator pitches in shill spaces, but you actually don't get to meet the artist behind the work. And I think pitching your work is very different to talking about yourself and learning about the work from that point of view. So I think, yeah, learning about the artist and actually getting to know the other people in the space is a kind of longer, it's a bit of a deeper dive into these people, and I think it makes their art more valuable to the viewer, to the collector, to the other people in the space. And every single person I speak to, I learn from and I'm inspired by, so I would glean little bits of information that I can then put into my own work. Yeah. Even if they're just kind of bits of process or ways that someone's dealt with some marketing or whatever it is. And I think as a listener, it's really nice to be able to identify with people who you may view in the Web 2 world. There may be artists with hundreds of thousands of followers who you wouldn't even dare to speak to. You know, you'd be terrified. You put them on a pedestal. In Web3, we are literally saying good morning to them every single day, asking how their morning surf was. So, it's such a leveler that it's a really great opportunity for people to like learn and be able to identify with other people in space.
Well, I feel like your space is so authentic, and I think that feeds, people see that you actually really care about all these artists, and I think that's why they also invest in you as an artist as well. But I'm going to jump to Lost Girls of the Metaverse, Fran. I mean, Kate has done a really interesting, she's built community in a very interesting way, but you've done it in a very different way. And I wonder whether you can talk a little bit about how sort of Lost Girls of the Metaverse sort of came to be, and, how that's fed into sort of your artwork.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess for me, you have to go right back to the beginning. I feel like no one really speaks about it, how kind of daunting and intimidating it can be when you are, as an artist or an illustrator, start to want to look into what is Web3, what is an NFT. I know when I first started, I felt incredibly lonely right at the very beginning because I didn't have a big group of in real life friends to just chat to about what I was wanting to do. And I think for me, that experience of joining Twitter, I'd never used Twitter before. It's crazy, I know, but never used it before. And instantly finding just a few people who I gelled with, like instantly, and I could reach out to, and I could ask them, bounce ideas off them, get that support. That was a real learning curve for me. It was like a aha moment, because if I was feeling anxious and not really knowing who to turn to, like, there must have been so many other women out there feeling exactly the same way. And Lost Girls of the Metaverse didn't turn into what it turned into until a little bit further down the line, but it grew into what it was, this sort of lovely, intimate female community, because of my experience, because I felt intimidated in a lot of the bigger discords. I felt like I couldn't handle that. So yeah, community for me was actually finding my people, finding my tribe, I guess. And it's great because we're all still amazing friends even now. So a year later, so yeah.
I mean, that's really incredible. And it's really interesting, isn't it, that obviously, like, you built Lost Girls of the Metaverse from your experience. Yeah. Kate, you saw I guess, a pain point in sort of Twitter Spaces, didn't you? And I think it's really interesting because I came into the space thinking, okay, I'm just a one-to-one artist, called myself Power of Women, and I think, and we always say it's by accident, but I think it's something to do with the subconscious of actually responding to the space around us, right? Because, I kept on going, I'm a one-to-one artist, and people going, so you're the next big female project, right? Because I came in at a time when World of Women and Boss Beauties and Women Rise and Women and Weapons, and people were like, you're the next big project, right? And at one point I was just like, well, I'm tired of saying, no, I'm a one-to-one artist. I was like, yeah, okay, we're a project. And then, suddenly you're like, okay, well, I'm going to feed off this sort of like collector mentality of like, I want to purchase art as part of a collection, and creating art inspired by the people, in the space. And I think Power of Women has always been like, there was a lot of women who felt like, at that time a year ago where it was very bro-ish, that finally there was art that was representative of them, and if they're not white, especially then, right? And so, that's how sort of like, I guess, Power of Women was built. So it's very interesting that we've all sort of come in as, as artists, and then suddenly, we've gone, okay, there's a pain point there, whether that's part of our story or whether that's part of the community, and then sort of built on. But okay, so we're talking about unique selling points because obviously we've sort of served, I think a part of the community, or part of like sort of this industry that we feel, is that we want to sort of serve. So how much of your sort of, I guess, unique selling point is your art, and then how much of it is the community? So how much of like sort of your identity in the space is driven by the community that you've built around you, and how much of it is driven by your art? Kate, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I find this question quite hard to answer, actually, because it's quite hard to quantify it. But I think that my USP as an artist is something that I entered the space with, because I'd been an illustrator for a decade. I had a very defined style, still do, and obviously it's evolving, but I think it's recognizably mine. So that's kind of my USP. from my art point of view. But I guess the USP of the space, and now the podcast, is that I kind of wanted to put this space in a position where people recognized it as essentially spaces at the time, to me, were not enjoyable to listen to. And I wanted to make the space, I wanted to think about the user experience. So for the listener and for the guest, I wanted it to be an enjoyable experience for everyone, and something that people remembered and wanted to return to. So I think that that's fed into my personality as an artist as well, I think. I like to try and, as a one-of-one artist, and sometimes occasionally doing editions, I like to think of how I can perhaps add value to the collector. I've obviously got my art as my USP, but I kind of want to put my personality into it and feel like you're buying into a piece of me, rather than just buying this image. You're actually perhaps getting something back, or perhaps getting a sense of belonging. Like, I'm not a project. Oh, excuse me. I'm not a project, but I'm. That's what happens when it's the morning of the second day of the. But yeah, I'm not a project. I'm a one-of-one artist, but I do feel still have a brand, And I think that kind of USP goes hand in hand with Fangirl Friday as well. People have got to know me as a person, and I put a lot of that person into my work. So I guess that's kind of my USP.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting, because I think it is really hard to quantify, isn't it? Like, where is the breaking point? How much of you are feeding off your community, or the community that you've built? And I hate the word community as well, because for one-to-one artists, it's more like patrons or collectors, isn't it?
Well, yes, but also it's kind of like friends and peers.
Friends, and then, yes.
Because, I think there are people that won't necessarily collect my work, or won't necessarily be able to collect my work, but they're supporting me. They're part of my community. They will always, retweet my work or write about me or whatever. And I think those are members of your community as well. So they're not necessarily your patrons. They're kind of your fan base as well.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's where the term Fangirl Fridays come from. Fran, I find like Lost Girls of the Metaverse. I mean, I sometimes forget that you're like a project, and then sometimes I forget that you're, you are. There's no cutoff point. No. Whenever you co-host Fangirl Fridays, I think Lost Girls is Fran is Lost Girls. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you've got this, a community of women around you, and then also, your art is the sort of like branding face of Lost Girls of the Metaverse. I mean, how much do you feel like your community influences your art, or do you feel like all of it is just sort of encapsulated in this one body?
That's a very good question. For me, personally, I haven't been an illustrator for very long. So, like, when I joined the space, it was all quite new to me. So I always feel like what I've grown with Lost Girls, for me, feels more important. It's the community side of things. That's what really got me excited. Like, when I realized, okay, there isn't something quite like this out there right now, that was my button to go, okay, full speed, this is what I'm going to do now. Obviously, I love illustrating. It's a hobby. It's always been a hobby, and it's now, a bit of a passion. But that almost comes second now, which is so odd. And I never thought I would actually say that. When I first released Lost Girls, they were all editions so they were never necessarily kind of one-of-ones. And it was more just that kind of, I say, membership ticket into this little private female community. And that, for me, was my unique selling point, because I knew that there were women out there who wanted that, who didn't want to have to, fight for attention in huge Discord spaces, or didn't feel comfortable asking questions in those kind of environments. Not to bash men, because, love men. But, when some of those spaces, you were surrounded by incredibly experienced NFT holders and collectors, and actually when you're starting out, you have a lot of questions that to some might sound quite silly, or might sound, quite naive, and they don't have time to answer them. So I wanted to create a space where no question was silly enough. And if there was another female artist just starting out and she wanted half an hour with me on Zoom just to bash some ideas around, that was okay. We could do that. So, because that's what I had with certain friends when I first started, and that was really helpful. So, yeah, that for me is the most important. And just being able to support the other ladies in the space in a bit more of an intimate way, it's been really lovely. And I've learned a lot from it as well.
I mean, it sounds really friendly. It sounds really friendly, and
it's friendly.
And I think there's been the word authenticity gets thrown a lot in this space, and I feel like, I feel like you've both built around your art and around your brand just a lot of loyal supporters, friends, collectors. I mean, that just sounds
friends.
Yeah,
it's definitely friends. I personally don't think of anyone as my collector. It's completely not how it is for me at all. Everyone in our little group, we support each other consistently, and that's I collect other work as well. I collect their work, and they collect mine, and it's just how it is, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the friendship. I mean, this conference is kind of a testament to the friendships that we've made. Literally hugging people like old friends who
you've never met before.
Never
been
met.
pen pals for a year.
In fact, I've only been in this space for under a year, so it's just insane, isn't it? But that's the beauty of Web3.
Yeah.
The friendships that you build and the connections that you make are genuine, and you literally are speaking to those people more than you speak to your actual friends.
Yeah, and I find this remarkable because it's on the foundation of art, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's you're building friends on the foundation of art, and I find that just bonkers. It wouldn't happen in any other industry, I think.
No, and as an illustrator, as someone who was an illustrator for a long time before that, it's a very isolating industry because you're sitting alone working all day, and now I feel connected with peers across the world. It's amazing, and you can bounce ideas off each other, and it's just it's absolutely like the dream, really, for someone who's a very isolated artist.
Yeah, I mean, it's really incredible. I think for Power of Women, it's been this relationship between community and art, and I think there's a sense of empowerment in the space where it's if you don't like my art, that's fine, collect elsewhere. If you don't like my community, that's fine, be somewhere else. But then at the same time, the community has sort of, my art has its own style. We all have art that is very strictly our own style. But at the same time, we are responding to the community around us. One of the collections that sort of really propelled us in the space was Women of the Metaverse, and that was inspired by sort of real women in the space who were able to share stories because we were throwing out questions and going, we really want art that reflects the people around us. We're talking about womanhood and, cultural identity and that sort of thing. And it's really interesting that you're gathering these people around you who have this collective mindset, but at the same time, you have this identity through your art that is really distinct. So there's a really interesting relationship there of friendship, community, collector, art as an identity, art as a brand. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think you, with Power of Women, have really created this incredible feedback loop. So you actually ask your community what they want to see, and then you make it happen. And so the stories that you're telling are real, genuine stories of the people in this space, which is incredible.
Yeah, that sort of built because of, I felt that built because a lot of women, I think when we entered, we were going, oh my God, this is a majority male space, right? But 100%. And we were going, okay, well, we want to learn a lot about the technology, about the art, but actually also we're not talking about ourselves as women, we're talking about ourselves as investors or collectors. Yeah. And I felt like, Power of Women was just like a platform that everyone clutched to be able to say, actually, in any sort of realm, we weren't able to talk about things like, miscarriages or being a mum, like losing your identity to motherhood, or feeling like you can't step up and talk about, cultural issues or, in terms of your identity in spaces. And I felt like, my partner and I, Jack, we're just feeding off this sort of need to be able to represent and amplify these stories, but at the same time, my art is my art. So if you don't like it, you can go elsewhere. But, if you like it, you're super, super welcome. So, okay, we've got a few minutes left. I want to just touch on the fact that, we are having, as artists, there's no middleman. It means that we have access to be able to build community where I think previously it would be very, very difficult. We have to juggle a lot of hats.
Yes.
How how much and community building is incredibly important. How much of it do how is there any balance?
No. No. Some weeks I forget that I actually draw for a living. It's no, it's literally like having a one-man band and not really knowing how to play any of the instruments. Like I mean, the drawing part I've got down, but I don't spend an awful lot of time doing that anymore. But it's really enjoyable. We're entrepreneurs essentially, and you have to spend that time selling your wares and building your community. It's like a really important part of it, and. That's the way that, I think you see artists who bash out a lot of work and they don't necessarily do the community side of it. And then they're not wagami. Because you really need to invest in the community as much as I know artists are often introverts and they aren't necessarily comfortable with doing this. Yeah. I mean, and I get that. But there's the nice thing about Web3 is there's so many different ways. You can find the one that works for you. The one that worked for me was talking in spaces because I like to talk. But I don't necessarily spend loads of time on Discord, for example, whereas some people find that really a comfortable space to be in. So I think it's super important to spend a lot of time working on your community, but there's always going to be a way that works for you.
Yeah.
And that's what you found, I guess, by using a Telegram rather than a Discord.
Completely agree, yeah. And just juggling it and making sure you definitely keep the balance. You don't overdo it on one side of things, and then you end up burning out. Well, that is a real thing that happens.
I mean, it's like hands up who's had burnout.
Very recently. So yeah, it's finding your own way with it. Even if that is literally just logging onto Twitter once a day and sharing a few posts from friends, even if that's all it is. It's you've just got to keep it going.
Well, I think it's overwhelming, isn't it? The body of work that you've got to do and the plates, the number of plates you've got to spin. I feel like there's been points, especially in the market, where it gets tougher to do things when a lot of people may have left, or the people who have supported you before are not there anymore, or the dynamics of the community change. But I think at the end of the day, art is fun, right? So you've got to find the fun in actually showing up every day and chatting to your friends or your collectors and just having fun with it. But okay, so we've got a 1 minute left. So takeaway question: what advice would you give for any artists out there looking back at sort of your year's experience as an artist?
I definitely think spaces are a really good thing to do.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
And if you so this is how I met Fran. I liked the sound of her on a space. And so I got in touch with her and I said, you sounded really smart and let's connect. And I think just making connections, like real authentic connections. I know we said authentic quite a few times, but like real authentic connections, that is what it's all about. Yeah. That's my takeaway.
That's your takeaway.
Yeah,
would you say the same thing?
Yeah, just as hard as it might be, put yourself in a position that makes you maybe feel a little bit uncomfortable, because actually if you don't take those risks, if you're not comfortable with speaking, just give it a go, because that is the best way, like Kate said, to make those connections. And once you've got those connections, you are winning, because you'll always have that support.
Well, we've run out of time. We've literally got 4 seconds left on the clock. So if you'd like to find us, if you'd like to chat with us, you're super, super welcome. Please do. I'm Power of Women NFT. Kate is Leopard's Lunch _, and Fran is Lost Girls _NFT. So please say hi. We would love to chat with you. Thank you so much.
I have some stickers as well if anyone wants.